explain what I'm going to try to do in the next couple of hours, basically. So I'm going to try, because I love being able to boil things down, and I'm going to try my best to boil down the essence of basically the most influential school of Hindu mysticism, which is, broadly it's the Vedanta, and narrowly it's Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta. And then even more specifically, it's really that through the lens of a very famous sage, Indian sage of the 20th century, Sri Ramana Maharshi. So this is stuff I've been studying for the last 20 years, studying, practicing, and he did this amazing job of really just boiling it down. I mean, there's such simplicity, such beauty in it, and it's very profound and it's very radical. And I just love the idea of there is an enormous literature, and there's enormous there's complexity in tools. Why are they there? They're there because people have different complications in terms of their understanding, their own psychological issues. They need to deal with this or that, which totally understandable. It will occur to almost everybody. But the very heart of it is actually extremely simple. So let me give a very big picture first, and the way I'd like this to go is overall is I'll give some of the big picture, and then the sort of namesake of this workshop is the idea of self-inquiry, which is a practice as well, and so we'll practice some of that and see how it goes. And that's just generally how I want it to work. And I want people to ask questions when they occur to you. Let this be a conversation, because the reality is ultimately is Vedanta is, which by the way stands for, it's like the end of the Vedas. There's a set of texts called the Upanishads, which were sort of generated after the Vedas about 2,500 years ago, and dealt with the highest reality, the highest truth. That's what Vedanta is. But Vedanta is not really, it isn't a system. It's something which everyone has to kind of, I can tell you the rudiments, but ultimately you have to kind of figure it. You're the individual little puzzle, and you have to figure out how exactly it really applies to you specifically. But it's very cool ultimately. So the big picture is this, right? And it shares a lot in common with strands of Buddhism and Taoism and all Eastern philosophies, and even strands of mysticism in Christianity and Islam. But the big picture is this, that we are under the influence of a kind of illusion or delusion, and it's basically a misidentification of ourselves with being a person. So we think we are a person. We think we have a name. We are our body. We are our thoughts. We are our emotions, right? And we are invested in our relationships, in our future, in our past, in our regrets, right? All of this whole structure, okay? That is the source of suffering. And it's also the source of all our existential questions. That's right. All the questions about why are we here? Why is there evil? What's it all mean? That's all rooted in this, essentially this illusion. And the idea behind Vedanta is, and I mean, of course, these other philosophies as well, is that there's a way of penetrating this illusion. And when you penetrate the illusion, what happens is that there is a deeper reality which is revealed behind this personal identification. And this deeper reality is perfect. It's perfect beyond conception. And yet it's not far away. This is the whole paradox of the situation. This perfection is said to be already the case. That is, you are already this. The fact that you don't think you're already this is the delusion, And in fact, once you penetrate the delusion, the real paradox is going to be that the delusion itself will have proved never to have existed. That's the real sort impossible to conceive thing. But in the end, the delusion itself doesn't exist. And so what we're trying to be, what the focus of Vedanta is essentially to see what is so unbelievably obvious that we can't see it, right? It's so intimate, it's so every second, right, that you can't, it's so in front of your nose, you literally can't see the astoundingly obvious. It's like trying to teach a fish what water is or something like that, you know? And so, and the basic idea is that the true self it's not, essentially, not what is perceivable. Anything that is perceivable is changeable, and the true self is that which is aware of all the things that are perceivable. So the traditional way in Vedanta you would go, and the Ramana Maharshi has a little twist on this, but the basic idea in the original traditional Vedanta was what was called jnana yoga. So jnana yoga is the yoga of knowledge. And they would simply say, look, you know, they didn't go, they didn't necessarily argue for this as rigorously as people might do today, from a different sort of scientific materialist, you know, mindset. But basically, their approach was different. Their approach was, if you were a student at that time approaching a guru, you would already have a certain amount of faith, essentially, in the scriptures, basically. And so you were like coming with a certain amount of faith. It's different now, and it's totally fine that it's different now, but just to let you know, that's what it was. And so the idea was the student would be told, look, you know, you are not that you are not that which you can observe. And the reason you know that you're not that which you can observe is because if you were it, you couldn't observe it. That's the basic fundamental rule. And then they would walk people through this logic. Well, they would say, look, you know, you can observe your body, right? So you're not your body. You can observe the outside world, so you're not the outside world. You can observe your thoughts, so you're not your thoughts. You can observe your emotions, so you're not your emotions. And in fact, this is where it gets tricky, right? So you're like, okay, well, I can observe all of that. So clearly, then I must be, well, the witness of all of these things. And that is true, except there is one caveat. So it's that the waking witness is considered different than the true witness. So what does that mean? So they also have this reasoning, again, in traditional Vedanta, about there are three states of consciousness. There's the waking state, there's the dreaming state, there's the deep sleep state, right? So, and they would say, look, you know, it's the same person, or the same, person's the wrong word, it's the same self that is the observer of all three of these states. So, you know, your identity is one way in the waking state, and it's kind of a different way in the dreaming state. You're still an observer, but you're observing sort of just purely the mind in the dreaming state, right? In the waking state, you have access to the so-called physical world. And in the deep sleep state, there appears to be no ordinary observation at all. See, ordinary observation is divided between a subject and an object, meaning that like there's me and there's like what I look at, right? There's you and there's what you observe, right? So that's the case in waking and dreaming, but in deep sleep it doesn't appear to be the case, right? There's just what we can't really say much about deep sleep except that it seems like nothing almost, right? Mm-hmm. But Vedanta would say it's not absolutely nothing. It's something, or the self is perceiving a lack of objects. Now, why does this matter? This matters because the idea is the self is not the same as your waking witnessing. Does that make sense? A little bit, I'm sure. I'm sure it's a lot to digest very quickly. I'm giving you a lot very quickly, I know that. But because if you work out, okay, I'm not all the things I perceive, I'm not in the external world, body, feelings, thoughts, etc. Well, I must be this thing which is observing them, right? Except that what we think of as the observer is the waking observer, which is the observer, which it's still, it observes in terms of this subject-object duality, right? But in deep sleep, that kind of observation isn't there. and yet we're still there. That's the argument. We don't disappear in deep sleep. So that means what we really are is something which even our normal kind of waking experience is not what defines us. There's something even deeper than that, which is, this is why it's said that the true self, it's beyond even being and not being. Because in deep sleep, it seems like nothing is, and yet we are in some deep sense, some profound sense, right? Now, why would we say we are? And you can ask these questions. In fact, you should ask questions. This is a large part of the spiritual search, is asking questions to resolve your doubts. So these will come up, and I know I'm flooding you with a lot of difficult to digest information, but basically, one answer to that would be this, that deep sleep is not like total nothingness. And we know that because when we wake up, we have a vague sense that we slept. So the fact that we know that we slept suggests that there is a very, very, very faint memory associated with deep sleep. It's just of a very different kind of experience. So what are we? So what are we ultimately? Traditional Vedanta says, if you just work it out using logic and reason, we are that which stands beyond all the three states of consciousness. We're beyond the waking, we're beyond the dream, we're beyond deep sleep. We cannot be defined by anything. The traditional definition is the self, which they would call Brahman actually, as the Sanskrit word for the self, is nadi nadi, which means not this, not that. Nothing can be said of it. Nothing can be said of it. And yet it is. And not only is it, but we are it, we experience it constantly. It is our direct experience. It has direct knowledge of itself. So it's not merely an abstract concept. It is something which we can recognize directly in some very inconceivable, unthinkable way. But it's so intimately right here, right now. So the whole purpose of Vedanta is to clear away essentially they would say, look, the reason you don't see this, which is so obvious thing, is because what we think of as ourself is it's superimposed on all these external things, right? So steadily, we sort of take out all the things that it's superimposed from, right? Clear out all the clutter in who we think we are. Once we've cleared out all the clutter in who we think we are, that unthinkable, unsayable, nameless, can't even call it a thing, that remains, it will reveal itself, in some very profound way. So that's the basic idea of Vedanta. Now, how does Ramana Maharshi put a twist on this? So the very traditional way would be, okay, you meditate on these ideas, right? You think about these ideas about, okay, well, I can't be this and that and the other thing. I'm told that I'm this changeless self that is beyond birth, beyond death, beyond being harmed by anything, beyond the past, the present, the future, beyond all the three states of consciousness, which is perfect, complete in itself. You just meditate on this, and then you try to bring this thought in with you as you lived life, right? Like you constantly be thinking about this, and that would sort of free you from a lot of stress, basically, right? Because this is a very peaceful thought, right? And eventually your mind will become more and more calm, right? And because the idea is that the reason you don't see this is because the mind is agitated. This thought, contemplated, quiets the mind, and when it becomes sufficiently quiet, that truth just becomes obvious. Again, in some unthinkable, unsayable way, right? When the mind is compared to a kind of lake. When the lake, the moon is reflecting the lake, and if the lake has ripples on it, it's hard to see the reflection of the moon. If the mind is quiet, it can see the reflection of the moon. And this knowledge was considered the ultimate way of quieting the mind. I mean, a lot of other ways, typically, traditionally, would also be asked, like the student was supposed to come in with a certain sort of set of qualifications. They were already supposed to have a certain amount of emotional maturity and have a certain amount of dissatisfaction with life as it was ordinarily lived. And that was what would qualify them. Those qualifications are not the same today. But anyway, the point is that that, contemplating this, the traditional method was contemplating this knowledge with faith, living life, constantly meditating on this knowledge. The mind would become very quiet, suffering would evaporate, and eventually the student would become utterly established in this truth. And what would that mean? It would mean total liberation from suffering in some very, very deep sense. Total liberation from the illusion that binds you, and there's all kinds of ways of putting it. Freedom from the cycle of birth and death, it's been called, all kinds of things. Enlightenment, self-realization, moksha, Sanskrit word for liberation. Now, Ramana Maharshi has a slightly different take on it. Ultimately it's the same thing, but he sort of boils it down beautifully into a practice, because he's a little bit less, and even the traditional thing ultimately is a little bit less logical than it seems. Like, I've given it the form of logic, right? But the reality is, if you actually really deeply think on this, ultimately it will sort of baffle logic. And your mind, it's like a koan, like Zen koan, like you'll think about it and your intellect will go to a certain point and there won't be able to go beyond that point. And you'll be like, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean, right? And you think about it over and over and over again, your mind eventually stops, right? And there's something when the mind stops, then it reveals itself. Because what it is that which is underpinning the mind. It's with that which within which the mind is. So Ramana Maharshi's technique was a little bit different. It was a little bit less explicitly intellectual, although it was all about reading the great ancient texts and things like that. And those can be very helpful for a seeker, is the truth of the matter. But his method was what he called self-inquiry. And it was a somewhat more meditative method. See, in ancient Hinduism, you have many different methods sort of for different temperaments. So what I've given is sort of a more intellectual approach, but for example, you have like Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutras, and his was a more strictly meditative approach. There's more devotional approaches. They all come to the same thing. All the rivers lead to the same ocean ultimately. But Ramana Maharshi sort of combined a couple things. So he combined some of the knowledge yoga that I mentioned, but he also combined it with essentially a kind of meditation that you could do at all times. Now, how does this work? So this is called self-inquiry, and so the basic idea is this. Right now, you know that you're experiencing. Like right now, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to these words, I'm in this room, I'm having whatever thoughts I might be having, feelings I might be having, right? But it's very apparent, it's very obvious, isn't it? And feel free to object if you don't think so, but it's very obvious that I'm here. I'm experiencing this. I'm experiencing this. That's very clear, it's so obvious. So Ramana Maharshi says, okay, turn your attention to what the I is in that sentence of I'm experiencing. Like we all intuitively know I'm experiencing, but if we actually try to turn our attention to that, right? And then, now here's a rule. Well, let me give you two things. So two guidelines. So one is, in a way, you're asking exactly the same kind of question as if you had an ice cube in the palm of your hand, and someone said to you, where's the cold coming from? And you'd be like, well, it's coming from the palm of my hand, right? Like, it's not really an intellectual inquiry. You can just examine your experience directly, and then notice where the cold is coming from. Like, you have that knowledge, it is cold, and you just trace it to where it's coming from. So similarly, we have that knowledge, I'm experiencing, I'm here right now, and all he says is, well, where's that coming from? Now here's the rule, the one little rule. It's this, and it sort of goes along with what I said earlier. It's that if you can be aware of the thing that you think the I is coming from, it's not the I. Now why is that? Because, let me give you an example. So let's suppose I say, I feel like the I is coming from my head. This is a very common response, right? I feel like it's coming from here somehow. Well, coming from here somehow let's suppose it's a sensation in your head, okay? Well, are you aware of that sensation? Yes, you are, right? Otherwise you couldn't even say it, right? You're aware of the sensation. So who is aware of the sensation? I'm aware of the sensation, right? So the fact that I'm aware of the sensation means that the sensation can't be the source of the I. Does that make sense? Yeah? So then what do? In that case, you say, well, okay, I'm aware of the sensation again, and then again you return your attention to this question of looking in your experience to figure out, well, what is this thing called I? That's what self-inquiry is. So it's exactly very analogous to like in this room, right? If I said, where is the source of the light coming from, right? And then I'm like, oh, well, does it come from this table? Well, I can see this table by virtue of the light, right? So therefore, this can't be a light source. This is not a perfect analogy, but essentially, right? It's as if you were looking around the room and you're like, well, where is light coming from? Where is light coming from? Where is light coming from? And you kept backing away from all the things that you thought it was coming from, okay? Into seeing the obvious, into seeing the unsayable obvious. That's what it is. Because this is like the blind spot. This is Ramana Maharshi's brilliance. This is like the blind spot in our experience. It's like the weak point of the illusion. So if you stare at that weak point directly, which is what the I is, and you say, and you relentlessly dismiss all the things that you think it is, and you're like, no, I have to know what this very obvious, very clear, very simple fact is I'm experiencing right now. Like, what is that? What is that I that's experiencing? Like, literally, what is it in my experience that corresponds to the word I? That's all you're doing, right? And relentlessly hunt it, right? At every waking moment. That's another thing, right? So originally, you can start with a sitting meditation. But ultimately, this has to be taken into your day. You have to, it's compatible with every other activity, and basically the idea is you want to eventually come to a point where all your concentration is focused on this inquiry. And other things will go on by themselves. We don't credit our mind with having enough capacity, but it does. Those things will go on by themselves, and our conscious attention should be focused relentlessly on this, trying to see where the light that illuminates our experience comes from. Like, what is that light precisely? What exactly is it? What is it? And to be driven, right? Like, ultimately, to be driven with intense desire to know the answer to this question. Because that is ultimately what will reveal it. Like, it's when your mind wants it more than it wants other things, basically. That's the idea of attachment. I mean, the other thing about it is, I will just say in terms of painting a big picture here, that if you pursue this, you might have what I would call a glimpse. So you'll have a little flash of like, oh, that's it, right? And then it might be the case, as it is for almost everybody, that 2 seconds later, you'll be right back where you were, and that's totally normal. But then what'll happen is, the next time it will just be slightly easier to get to that same place, And you'll do this over and over again, and those periods when you get those flashes will come more frequently, and they'll last longer, and your mind will want it more and more and more, right? And ultimately, we are looking for something more than, in a way, the glimpses are the truth, but in another way, anything that has a beginning and an end is not what we're looking for. We're looking for something which is permanent, which cannot be taken away. And so, it is and it isn't the case. Let me give you one last analogy here before we actually try this out. So a useful way to think about this is, if you've ever had that moment when you just wake up, but before you remember who you are, where you are, anything about yourself or anything about the world, right? If there's that split second where you're not asleep anymore, but you just don't have any sense of identity. That, in some sense, is the truth. And it's right now. It's the case right now. And orienting your mind to noticing the fact of its being there right now, of its being continuous. You know, and in fact, even that, I will say, is continuous with deep sleep. So when we think about deep sleep, we think of a state of utter peace, right? We all love sleeping for that reason, because it's a state of peace. The peace of deep sleep is here right now. That's another way of thinking about this. So we are looking to notice that fact and to orient ourselves towards that fact. How? By cutting through all the, essentially all the narrative, the story. It's the story that we tell ourselves about who we are, right? And by relentlessly piercing through it, we can find that state.
I feel like I've definitely had that moment where you're like, you wake up and you're not fully awake, but you're not asleep yet. But the only time I've ever noticed it was like in a period of time where I was like in a period of like deep sadness or like heartbroken, and only the absence of that sadness in that moment when you wake up before you're awake enough to realize how sad you are.
Yes.
That's the only time I remember that happening.
That's
but
so
I, like,
interesting.
had that.
As a
Yeah,
contrast
it was
to
just like
sadness.
the absence of the feeling I knew to expect once I was fully awake.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's very interesting because I mean that's actually the great boon that powerful sadness brings. It can bring a reorientation. I mean, I can't resist telling you a great story. The Hindu literature is so full of fascinating stories, like things that you would never even dream of until you actually read it yourself. But there's a great story about sadness at this point. So there's a prostitute, okay, a middle-aged prostitute named Pingala, and she basically is outside her house at night. Okay, this is, I don't know when this was written, probably like 2,000 years ago or whatever it was, but and she's waiting for a customer. And there's all the other prostitutes, and they're getting customers, and she's waiting and waiting and waiting, and she waits the entire night, okay? And she doesn't get a single customer. And she becomes so depressed, so utterly despondent, that she, in that same moment, her mind is able to gain total detachment. And because of that, it's able to sort of see the truth, and she becomes instantly enlightened. So it's interesting, like that's sort of the connection, because like we have this sort of, because we're stuck in this sort of narrative, the mind just keeps going in this distracted state. You know, when you have a sadness, sort of like stops you in your tracks. It's like, what's the point of all this, right? That's an opportunity for the mind to actually look inward. Okay, so now let's do a little practice, and we'll do maybe several sequences of these depending on how we want to do this. But actually, maybe before we do that, let me just ask you, are there any questions? Okay, let's do it. So let's do this. Let's spend, let's say 10 minutes just trying, or maybe even 5 minutes first. Let's just do 5 minutes trying this out, and I want you to tell me your experiences, and then I'll react, and then we'll do it again. We'll try this a couple times, maybe 3 or 4 times even. Okay, so let's go ahead and try it for 5 minutes. So I was thinking maybe we should go around and talk about what it was like. You want to start?
Sure. I was trying to, I guess, capture the moment of just waking up, which I was, but then I kept kind of falling out, so it was just kind of like going in and out of that feeling.
Okay.
Trying to remember how to get myself there. Yeah.
So I would say, so from a self-inquiry standpoint, don't try to remember. I mean, it's said just to give you a sense of what it might be like, what the truth might be like, but trying to remember it is really, it's going to prevent you from getting there, ironically.
Yeah.
What you want to do is you want to focus on the sense of I right now.
Okay.
Like that sense of I. Where is that I? Like the fact that you're sitting down right now, or that you were even trying to remember that experience. Who is the I to whom all that was occurring?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you want to try to hone in on relentlessly. Because there's no way of directly even if you say remembering that state, it's not that state, because that state is not bounded by memory. That make sense?
Yeah.
So I would say what we're trying to do is essentially, in a way, we're trying to go beyond thought. That's actually in a way what we're trying to do. But we are trying to hold this one intention of trying to locate essentially the I. Okay. How about you?
So I started by just like what you said, like, okay, you're sitting in this room and you're perceiving that you're sitting in this room. So like I imagined space looking down on Earth, and then like, okay, zoom in, I'm on Earth, and then zoom in, I'm in North America. Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, like New York, Greenpoint, in this room, this, and then I realized, like, I don't think I can do this with my eyes closed. I feel like my eyes open is the thing that helps me, like, remember, like, I'm perceiving something in that moment. So I was like, okay, I need to keep my eyes open. And then I was like, that it kind of feels like a shortcut to open my eyes. Like, I'm like, okay, this is a shortcut that makes me feel like I'm getting to the I quicker.
Sure.
And then there was some part of me that was like, I wish I had a mirror in front of me, because I always feel a shortcut when I'm looking at myself in the mirror. Like, if you just look at yourself in the mirror for like a really long time, and you start thinking like, oh, there's like something inside here.
Yeah.
So I started thinking like, maybe this is about like figuring out like what those not shortcuts, but what the quicker path to those feelings are for me. And then I just started thinking about like, well, if I'm just like this perceiving thing, what's the point of like anything? Like, what's the whole point of anything if I'm just this perceiving thing instead of like a person? And
that's a great question, actually.
And then I was like, well, I think the point is that that's not the point. Like, I think the point is that there is no point. And I was like, that's kind of like seems like a chaotic loop to be stuck in, but then I kind of felt like maybe that's a peaceful loop to be stuck in.
So
that's where I landed.
you brought up like several really interesting issues. So one is, first of all, the idea of, and it's sort of along the lines of what you're doing, like this idea of like trying to capture feelings or visualize. Those are, you want to do is not think about it in terms of visualization or getting to a particular place, but even while you were visualizing, who was it that was perceiving those visualizations? Right? Just try to turn your attention, which it's beyond normal. It's totally perfectly okay to go through. But what I'm doing is I'm just trying to give you constructive, like reorientations, right? So go from that to who is it that is perceiving these visualizations? And then you brought up this open eye point. I was going to comment on that. I'm glad you brought this up. That's fantastic. Again, I'm all about that, right? Go from closed eye to open eye, and as quickly as you can to doing this while you're walking, while you're talking, while you're cooking, while you're working, whatever it is you're doing, try to reorient the sort of search beam of your attention towards itself, like you're looking back at the movie projector, essentially. Where is that light coming from? You know, that's what you're essentially trying to do. Because at every moment, you know, and then you brought up this other point, I mean, which is again excellent. I mean, it's very true. You will have these philosophical questions, and they're perfectly normal. And two things I want to say. So one is a couple things I didn't really cover very much, but are helpful in the big picture of the spiritual search is it is useful, and I tried to give you a very quick one, but it's useful to have an intellectual big picture, you know, and everyone needs a different amount of it. Some people are more critical, they want very detailed. Other people, just a rough picture is enough. But it is useful to have the big picture, and you can get that via reading books like mine, or reading the ancient scriptures. You know, I recommend all of those things, very helpful. The second thing is, you didn't mention this, but I'm bringing it up. Very often the things that will interfere with self-inquiry will be essentially like the things that interfere with other kinds of meditation, namely emotional stuff that's going on in our life, concerns we have about whatever, relationships, career, anything, the grocery store, utilities, anything that bothers us. So a lot of the time, you know, the relevant work actually is psychological, you know, is the reality situation. And I tend to advise, I sort of like almost like fluoride in water. I'm like, guys, go get therapy. Like, it's a really good thing, you know. It's not talking about psychiatric medication, although sometimes that can be useful. But you know, a lot of seekers, and I speak from personal experience. Like, I have benefited a lot from therapy in my own spiritual search. It's been helpful to calm the mind psychologically while you're searching. So, and if, you know, in terms of therapy, I have to say, also plug this, like I'm a fan of psychoanalytic therapies as a general rule, because they're more into the unconscious, and that's where I think the real struggles for a lot of people are. Not everybody needs it, but it's helpful for a lot of people, and a lot of people find, I think, that, you know, if you have this sort of just recalcitrant depression or anxiety or things that are like you just can't figure out, like, oftentimes those things, unfortunately or fortunately, have to be dealt with psychologically, or your spiritual search will be hindered. So that's something to keep in mind. But then the other thing you brought up, which was a great point, was, you know, what's the point of things? Which, if you're just a perceiver, what's the point of things? And that's an excellent question. The real answer is, I mean, there's various philosophical answers, but the real answer is this, that the question of what the point is okay.
The point?
Well, it's not exactly that is the point, but there's an assumption that I'm the doer of actions, right? So what's the point of me doing things, okay? Like if I'm just this perceiving ghost in the machine or something like that. But the real reality is, you're not the doer of things. You're not the doer of things. You're not the enjoyer of things. And this is very radical. This is the way radicalism in Vedanta. You're not the doer of things. You're not the enjoyer of things. You're not the sufferer of things. So it doesn't matter what, quote, quote, you think the point is. In fact, the person who has the question of what the point is not you. Whoever brings that question up must answer it, essentially. But the interesting thing to ultimately realize is things happen for their own unthinkable reason, basically, essentially. Like even the very thought process about what's the point, that itself arises for reasons that are unseen and invisible. I mean, call God's will if you want, you can call karma if you want, you can use whatever theoretical explanation you want, but ultimately the point is, what we are trying to see is that the true self is utterly not involved in any of that. Which is, I mean, it's a mind-blowing thing, right? Truly speaking, you actually have, this is scary. This is scary, and a lot of teachers won't say this so explicitly because it is such a radical thought, really. But the truth of the matter is, you don't actually have any share in the action that goes on in your life. You are, in fact, at best, not even observing. You are not even the observer. That's like that distinction between waking consciousness. The truth of the matter is, what you are is when you are that which, when you contemplate it, the mind stops. Therefore, nothing can be said about it. So all the questions, like what's the point of it, or similar, so many people question, well, after enlightenment, what happens, or something like that, right? All these questions are all assuming that I'm the one who is responsible for my actions, right? But it'd be very similar. I'm addicted to this analogy, but like if you were watching a movie, suppose you're watching a movie, okay, and you got really into this movie, and you lost yourself. You were like, I'm the main character in the movie. Like you just completely forgot you were you were where you were. And like whenever the main character was fearful, you were fearful. Whenever they were happy, you were happy. Okay? And then at a climactic point in the movie, someone nudges you, and you're like, oh, I'm actually sitting here on my couch. I'm not actually in the movie. I'm just sitting on my couch. So then would it make sense to say, yeah, but if I'm sitting here on my couch, who's going to keep doing the things in the movie? You were never doing the things in the movie. You're not doing them now, you weren't doing them then, you won't be doing them in the future.
And that's what brings you peace?
Well, yes. I mean, the thing is, it's not even brings you peace, because even the notion of, I mean, we say it brings you peace because it's a verbal shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that you are beyond even peace and unpeace, right? Because all the things like peace or lack of peace are occurring to that person in the movie, but you're not a person at all. So all those different opposites, like anger or lack of anger, happiness or sadness, or pleasure or pain, peace or unpeace, all of those are in the movie. What you are is beyond all of them without exception. So what is that? It can't be said. It's that which by definition cannot be talked about. It's just when the mind is silent. It's that. Make sense? Probably not. I'm kidding. All right, so we'll keep going. So how about what was your experience?
I did the open eye first, because I felt like I had to go to a bigger place. And then asking myself, who am I? If I am not my job or this family member or this body, this skin, these organs, and then I had to go close eyes to go deeper, I feel like. Then who am I was just very much the question. And then once you figure out like, okay, this body is actually running on its own. I eat this food, I choose the food, kind of.
Yes.
I suppose subconsciously I choose that food, I chew it, but then the body processes it itself.
Yes.
And I have energy, it all happens by itself. Okay, so then the next question is, why am I here?
Oh, so you went to the same pointlessness place, essentially.
Yeah.
So
if it's all happening without me knowing, then like what's the point? Because then we're all kind of the same. We're different, but the same.
I mean, the real question is, who's asking the question? So because that's what it really comes down to, right? The one who literally went through that thought process of finding out like I'm not the body, I'm not processing food, and I'm not doing my own energy, and all this is happening with or without me, right? All of that ran through your awareness, right? So how do you know that it ran through your awareness? That's what we're trying to point our attention towards, right? Like attend to that. What is that? Who is aware of all of this? Who's aware of all? What if you try to look at that?
Right.
Who is aware of all these images, the thought of pointlessness, right? The even attempting to come back to that feeling of waking up like that, right? This is all occurring, it's all in your consciousness, it's in your awareness. In whose awareness, right? Because we use that word I constantly, right? So that word I, like, it plucks a string in us somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. It is that which is aware of all of this, but what is it? What exactly is it? I mean, now it's important that you ran through that thought process too, because another thing I want to say is, so again, what we want to do is we want to look, ultimately we want to look essentially beyond thought, right? I mean, okay, that's not how I really would like to phrase it, but again, you're going through that thought process, and what you want to do at a certain point is notice, okay, I'm going through this set of thoughts. To whom are they occurring, right? Because it's almost like as if you had said, as some people might say, for example, like, oh, I'm the brain. Right? A lot of people say that. So I'm the brain, but then what I want you to notice is, put aside the philosophical disputes about whether you're the brain or not, and let's think experientially. Okay? Experientially, the brain is two words that connect to a concept, maybe an image of a brain, or maybe the feeling of your head, okay? All of that is occurring in your awareness, experientially, okay? Whose awareness? So the awareness to whom they occur, how do you know that it's occurring to you? Like what does that even mean, right? Like it's occurring in my awareness. Who's the my refer to, right? That's what we're trying to be like, that my. Now, the idea is that again, like we could be drawn by that into this whole set of intellectual musings, but what I want you to notice is that the my is something which is very directly apparent right now, right? Like the fact that all these thoughts ran through your minds, it's not like you had any doubt did they run through somebody else's mind? No, they ran through my mind, right? So that the obviousness of that, right? The clarity of that fact, turn your attention to that. What is that? What is that by which you know all of this? Know all of your thoughts, right? Like you know I am the one to whom these thoughts occur. I am the one to whom they occur. It's so sorry?
Satnam. Like I am that.
Exactly, I am that, precisely. That's right. I am that.
But then aren't you identifying yourself in that?
Well, we're hunting for it. So all I'm saying is you start with that, and then you look at what it is. What is it? What is that light? That obvious fact, that unquestionable, indisputable, clear fact of your own awareness of all of the things. Turn your attention to that and examine what it is. How do I know that I'm aware? How do I know that I'm aware? And not thinking about it, but literally trying to say, like, where is that channel of knowledge coming from? You know, like it's like there is something in me that knows that it's aware, that I'm aware. What is that? Like, as I said, just like you know that a thought, like you know what that is, and you know what an emotion is, and you know what a sensation in your body is, and you know what that object over there is. But this very simple concept of I, what does that correspond to, right? Like what is that reflecting of? What do you mean by that? You know, so it goes beyond this question of what's the point. To whom did that question even occur? Who is the I who's aware of that question?
I feel like having a physical body is like a huge roadblock in this whole process. Right? Like having a body, you're just like, well, what about my brain? Am I this? Am I that? And like, if that was just not there, I feel like this would be so much easier.
No, but it's really hardly a roadblock at all. Because the reality is, right, your physical body, again, is just a thought, right? It's just a thought. So to whom did that thought occur? And again, like, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, it's not so easy necessarily. Do you see what I'm saying when I say that you know that you experience your body, right?
Yeah.
I experience my body, right? That, the light by which you know that, it's something we're pointing to, like something which is so, it's exactly like we're pointing to light, right? It's exactly like that, right? You know, it's as if I was trying to say, how do I point to light? But when I'm actually pointing to is an object, right? Like, oh, like that's, how do you know that thing? Well, it's by the light, right? And then of course, like you think about the things that I'm pointing to instead of the light by which you know them. But every single thing that you know by the light of that I, right? Every single thing that occurs to you, every thought, every visualization, every question about pointlessness, every memory, anything, perception, emotion, whatever it is, you all know them by virtue of the fact that they occur to me. So that me, which is aware of all of them, it's associated with something. Like, what do you mean by that? What is it? Where is that light of awareness coming from? Who is aware that I'm aware, another way of putting it? Who is aware that you're aware? And then, every time you have a thought come up about it, you immediately ask of it, am I aware of this? And then you turn it again, right? Because these thoughts will keep coming, right? Like in amazing profusion, right? Like all kinds of ways, all kinds of angles, so many, like, you know, different things. You'd be like, you know, what am I if I'm not the body who's doing all of these things? Or what's the point of it? I mean, there's different angles at which all the thoughts will cut in. And relentlessly, what we want to do is we want to turn them to say, am I aware of this? Who's aware? Who's that? Who's the I that's aware of this? Who's the I that's aware of this? Who's the I that's aware of this? Over and over and over again. And you don't even need the words, right? I'm saying that over and over, like as if you have to keep posing these words, but you don't need the words. You just need to silently turn your attention towards whatever that is. You know, my words can only go so far, right? So you have to kind of flail around in the darkness, essentially, trying to figure out what would it mean to turn your attention towards that. Because you're right. You're totally right that it can't just be the thought, I am that. No, because that thought, I am that, is also something that occurs to you. So whatever grand philosophical thought it is, it still occurs to you. So who is that to whom it occurs? Shall we try this again? 5 more minutes? All right. start again?
Yeah. Gosh, I went pretty deep in that one, but I don't know. I was, gosh, this one left me a little. Actually, can I go last? And this
Sure,
one is when
absolutely,
my mind
not at all. Go
all
for
over
it.
the place.
You want to start, Pooja?
I guess I, again, ask myself, who am I? And the deeper I thought about it, like, I had a lot of health problems when I was little, and I wasn't supposed to live, and I obviously wanted to live. And so it felt almost like it's like a spirit or an essence to you. And I kind of, I know I was just thinking only about myself, but I thought about my dog who had passed away recently, and she also had a spirit and an essence. Like, you know, because animals are just, they don't have all the attachments, I feel like, that humans do. And she just wanted to play, love, eat, or sleep. Like, that's all it was. But she was different, and it's almost like a spirit or an essence as well. I almost feel like there's this deeper part of you that isn't really a thing, that just goes. It's like a machine, and it just happens. I guess it's kind of just, I don't know where I went exactly with that, but it's almost like a spirit to you.
So,
I mean, I don't want to call it a thing, but.
well, so let me ask you this. So, well, first I'm sorry about your dog.
Oh, that's okay.
But the other thing I want to say is that whole idea of a spirit. I mean, this is great. So this is basically effectively what you know. It's like a exact response essentially to this question. And what I want to ask you is the idea of an essence or a spirit. Do you notice it's an idea?
Right.
And to whom does it occur?
Right.
Well, let me ask you, to whom does it occur?
I feel like it's to that spirit or essence,
But doesn't
it
occur in your own awareness right now? No,
Right.
Well, forget the attachment stuff.
Right.
Right now, aren't you thinking that thought?
Right. Yes.
So the one to whom that thought even occurs, to that I, what is that?
Me.
Well, what is that?
Exactly.
That's you see what I'm saying? So that's what you want to do, right? So that's an idea, an essence, or a soul that's in all living things.
Yeah.
Okay? But that I want you to notice is itself a concept that occurs in your awareness right now.
Right.
So if you said, well, to whom does this thought occur of an essence? Like you said, to me. That's what you got to look at. So you got to turn from that idea. You got to pivot on it and say, to whom is this whole stream of thought occurring? It's occurring to me, right? So you went from thinking about who am I in essentially a philosophical sense, which is, I mean, this is a totally natural progression. So, I mean, this is correct. But you know, when I said to whom does it occur, you see what I'm saying experientially now. Do you? Sort of.
Yes.
Yes. So every time, and so that this was the case with your prior attempt too, right? You're thinking about the way the body worked, right?
Yeah.
So it's very easy to get, like I think you're illustrating, it's very easy to get caught up in, I mean, and ideas have a place, don't get me wrong, but it's very easy to get caught up in this as a kind of thinking about it. Thinking about this question of who am I? Like, what am I in the universe? Or what am I as a body? Or you know, do I share a soul with animals? Or these kinds of questions. When actually what we're looking at is something a little bit different, which is, to whom do all those things occur? And you know, I know that I'm experiencing those thoughts right now, right here. Like, that fact of my knowledge right now, what is that? Can I turn my inner eye to that now? Does that make sense? Yeah, so every kind of thought process, you have to relentlessly, mercilessly be like, but to whom is this occurring? And who is that? Who is that? What is that? That's the curiosity you have to have, but not, even the thoughts, right? Because again, the temptation is to answer that question in terms of a thought. Like, oh yeah, I am this or that. right? But no, I am this or that is also a thought. So to whom does that occur? In whose awareness is that? In my awareness, that me, like you said it. When you said that me, I felt that you were touching it. Like that was it. That me, which you're like, well, what is that? That's what you've got to turn to. How do you know that it's me? What do you mean by me? Because again, your mind will have 1,000 tricks to push you outward into these narratives about, let me construct this idea about what it would mean to have an essence, what it would mean to have a soul. But you're so caught in this web of words, and all of those words are still at every moment occurring to this me. So that me, which mutely notices all of this, that's what you have to turn your attention towards and be like, well, what is that? Well, what is that notices all of this? And every time a thought occurs, you have to keep turning from that thought to the one who notices the thought. Make sense? A little bit more? How about you?
I feel like my mind was like more quiet this time, which made it a little bit easier. I think my first time I also had like a similar notion of like it's like an essence or a spirit, but like then I was like, that's just like a label that I'm putting onto it. Like this is like me trying to identify with something.
Yes.
And then the fact that I'm doing that, it means I need to go like a layer further. So I just kept being like, asking myself, who am I? And then I kept being like, okay, well, who's the thing that's thinking this?
Yes,
who am I?
Exactly.
But like I didn't get to an answer. Like I just kept asking myself that, and it was like my mind was quiet.
Yeah.
And I just kept asking myself that, but I never got to an answer. And I kept like, anytime I like started feeling like I was losing it, it was me thinking like I need to find the answer.
Yeah. Look,
that's
great.
Me coming out of it, and then I'd be like, no, I think the point is that I don't have, but it's not about finding the answer. It's about the just awareness of that there's something beneath it.
Yes, it's exactly right, 100% correct. So that's exactly what happens. So you pursue this question, and your mind definitely does fall into a state of quietness, right? And then the question will be like, yeah, what's the answer? Which is again a deviation from that quietness. You see,
right.
So then you go back, like, because again, it's almost like another analogy for this is like we're trying to notice that what we're seeing is on a mirror. It's like we keep seeing the image on the mirror, but then what I'm trying to say is, but notice that it's on a mirror. It's on a mirror, right? And you could see the Taj Mahal or the pyramids or whatever it is on the mirror. It doesn't matter what you see on the mirror. Every time you're like, no, but notice that it's reflected on the mirror. That's the point.
It feels like it goes against my humanness to be like asking myself a question over and over again, but not actually wanting the answer. Or like not actually like trying to find the answer at the same time. So it feels like a weird.
Well, you are in a way trying to find the answer, but you're not trying to find the answer by thinking about it.
Right, I'm trying to find the answer by not trying to find the answer.
Yeah, in a way that's
so
true.
I'm like, this feels contradicting, like to my humanness.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's understandable because it's very counterintuitive.
Right.
And actually, what you say brings me up another point, which was something I want to talk about. But it's a perfect opportunity because you said it's almost like not trying to find the answer. The flip side of the coin of self-inquiry that Ramana Maharshi also recommends, and this is a more sort of quote-unquote devotional method, but it's equally powerful and equally true, and the two methods can be really combined. I'll really need to raise the method exactly, but essentially what you would call surrender. So what is surrender? Surrender means not moving voluntarily your mental muscle, essentially, for anything, right? So there's something within you that could decide to move, and you just say, I'm just going to sit in spa-like bliss, okay? Now, what does this mean? It means whatever goes on externally, let it go on externally. Whatever goes on internally, you also let that go on too. It could be any negative emotion. It could be anger, it could be fear, it could be frustration. It could even be what seems to be non-surrender. Let that happen, right? And you just say, nope, I don't care. Let non-surrender happen. Let whatever it is happen, right? I'm just gonna have the intention of just mentally laying back and not doing a thing.
Would you say it's like the absence of resistance?
You could say it's the absence of resistance. Yeah, and that is absolutely one way of looking at it. And it's the absence of resistance even to seeming resistance, right? Because there'd be, again, a tendency, I bring that up because there's a tendency to say, like, oh shoot, I got caught up in the resistance, right? Which is, it's true from one standpoint, but from another standpoint, there's no such thing as getting caught up in the resistance, right? Because surrender is, in effect, it's the other side of self-inquiry, because what is it? It's almost like posing a riddle. What is it in you that, despite whatever negative emotions or things that would be going on, can remain like that in that stillness? What is it that, no matter what you're thinking or feeling, no matter what you're perceiving, however embarrassing or shameful or whatever it is, painful, horrifying, right, can remain constant and effortless, essentially. Even when you're exerting effort, there's something which is effortless. So surrender, effectively, it's like another way of self-inquiring, essentially. It's, you could say it's a more effortless way, but the truth of the matter is even self-surrender requires effort, especially in the beginning.
You know you're surrendering.
Yeah, exactly. And then you'll be drawn out, right? Yeah, that's what it is. You'll find it very difficult because surrender requires a degree of trust, essentially. I'm going to allow myself to flail around, right? But it's exactly the same thing. So how about your experience?
Mine was, I'm still trying to piece it all together, but I was, every time I would think something or feel something, I would try to look what's underneath that for a second and then just kind of keep going. And then I got to a place where I just felt, I was feeling something here just completely empty. And I don't know why, but I was seeing a dark sky with stars. I don't know why, I was just seeing that in my mind. But I just felt completely empty of no feelings at all. And it kind of, I don't want to say scared me, but I was I didn't really ever feel that before. And I kind of went out because I was I'm so used to feelings are what triggers for me what is happening. And I usually embrace my feelings. If I'm feeling sad, what can I do to make me happy? All these different things, and I feel many things throughout the day, every day. So feeling nothing at all might be something good, but it almost freaked me out because I was oh wait, why? I don't know, but I can easily get lost in this and just feel nothing and just be nothing. But I almost, for the first time, I was I want to feel something, because I feel sometimes it, it's it lets me know what's happening around me, I guess. But I don't know. That's why I'm so confused by it.
No, I think you're touching on it.
I think it's
what it is. You did touch something. No,
really
absolutely. Your mind quieted, and you said you felt like you were feeling nothing. So you're absolutely correct. So the question is, so this is exactly what should happen. These are the kinds of progressions that will happen, right? Because your mind will quiet, and you will find these states of seeming emptiness, and then the question should be continued about who's experiencing the emptiness. Does that question resonate with you? Obviously something happened because you went to that state which you said you hadn't experienced before, so it seems to me that is progress, in my opinion. But tell me, I'm curious, when I say this question about to whom is that occurring, does that ring a bell in you?
In that moment?
Or even now, or generally speaking?
Yes. That I'm thinking, okay, I
Yes.
could have maybe even gone a step back, but in that moment, I really just didn't.
Sure.
It was I didn't exist. It was
That's perfect. No, that's exactly right. So if the rule is, it's fine. It's totally fine. It's, but this is why, of course, these are all very issues you probably don't have to worry about for a while. But the reality is, okay. So let me give you a small interesting caveat. So if you're in closed eye meditation, okay, and you pursue self-inquiry, you can actually fall into these very blissful states of, no mind, essentially.
Well, that's kind of what I because I do meditate, and I have a meditation teacher that I love sitting with, and who is a Buddhist, and he always sort of says, oh, inside it's just, our true nature is just bliss.
Sure.
So I was kind of hoping, well, not hoping, but like, I thought I would, if I got to that empty place, it would be a little more blissful. And it wasn't that it wasn't blissful, it was just nothing.
Right, so, well, two things. So one is, so the one who's complaining that it's just nothing, that's who you have to look at. No, it's true, because this is I mean, it's an important thing, and it's, you're actually all, I mean, you're all very close. The reality is it's all very, very simple, right? So when you're at a state when your mind is falling into quiet, and you're like, well, yeah, this feels like nothing, you know, it's actually very, very close to the truth. This is with a hair's breadth, you know, it's, but who is it that's complaining? The thing that's complaining that it's nothing is what's drawing you out from the bliss, actually, you know, ironically. Because what you think of as bliss is what you think is a bliss state, which, you know, has a beginning and an end. What we're trying to get to is the permanent bliss, essentially. So it's very similar to, okay, well, let me see. The early thing I wanted to say before I forget it is that if you're doing closed-eyed meditation, you can fall into states, maybe it didn't feel like this for you in this particular instance, but you can fall into states of, you know, no mind, essentially. And there's nothing wrong with those, actually, but the reality is what we want to do is we want to bring that into the rest of life. You don't want to just get stuck there. Because the point is, again, any state, however amazing it is, or deep or profound, ends. We're trying to find what is that which is not ending. So we have to bring it out into the real world and see if we can maintain that same, essentially, I mean, I don't want to say maintain that emptiness, because the truth is, even that's a thought, right? But to maintain the relentless focus on the I, or the relentless surrender, you know, that's what we want to do. So that is, shoot, what was I going to say? There's something else, but I forgot what it was. What was I going to say? Yeah. Any questions at this point?
Is that like a natural progression? Because I felt like similarly in moments like that as well. Is it a natural progression to start doing it like with your eyes closed and like that, and then progressively work it into moments when you're awake and like, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people find it more. I mean, the reality is you can do whatever works for you, but I think a lot of people do find it easier to start with a closed-eye meditation, just because it's more natural for them or whatever it is. And then they go to open-eyed, and then they go to try it when I'm walking around, or whatever it is. You can start mixing it up, whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, is the truth of it. I think for some people what it is, okay, so I'll anticipate certain things that will happen probably in the future. If you attempted to look at the eye while you were doing other things, especially at the beginning, it may feel very awkward. And people may feel like, oh, I just can't concentrate on two things at once, or something like that, right? So two things I'll say to that. One is, the real reality is that, like I said, you're not doing the thing that you think you're doing. So the fact of the matter is you can actually put your concentration on self-inquiry, and effectively what you're fated to do, you will do regardless. But if you feel that's too fear-inducing, then you can essentially try to slowly incorporate it in, right? Like, you know, a moment here, a moment there, right? You know, you might do it first when you're doing something which is relatively undemanding, like you're just walking down the street, right? And then you can work up to doing things which are more demanding, right? Like having a complicated conversation or something like that, right? But ultimately, yeah, ultimately you want to bring it out. And these are signs of progress. I mean, the mind falling into silence is a sign of progress. And you know, all you have to do is curb it every time with this, looking at the fact of its reflectivity, right? You're effectively, that's what you're doing. Every thought, you're like, yeah, but this is not just a thought. It's also a reflection in my awareness. So you're paying attention to that reflective aspect, right? And that's all you're doing. Again, it's like that mirror thing, right? If you're looking at a mirror, and I'm saying, forget what's happening on the mirror. Just notice that it's a reflection on the mirror. Just pay attention only to that fact. No matter what happens on the mirror, whatever it is you see, just pay attention to the fact that it's on the mirror, right? So similarly, whatever happens in your mind, pay attention to the fact that it's happening in my awareness, right? And then, of course, whose awareness? But eventually, that may lead you down to a place where it seems like there's no feelings, there's no thoughts. That's fine. That's totally fine. Oh yeah, go ahead, sorry.
By doing this, it just brings you to a state of like I had this happen to me in the spring where I was in a difficult conversation with someone at work, and I stepped outside of myself and I could see myself responding in a more calm and cool, collected way than the other person. And I could watch this and I'm like, this is happening right now and I'm going to handle it and it'll be okay. And I think that's how I processed that moment.
Yes.
So by having these self-inquiries just in your everyday, as you're walking down the street or whatever it is, riding the subway, it could be annoying, but that just helps you come to a calmer state of being.
Yes, so, I mean that's a large part of it for sure.
Use it, I guess.
I mean it is absolutely about coming to a calmer state of being. That's like 95%. But we are also ultimately trying to, like I said at the beginning, penetrate an illusion. So why is it in the first place that we need to put an effort towards this calmer mind, right? And who's putting the effort in, actually, right? These are the questions that are, or if we're going to surrender, who's surrendering? I mean, ultimately, what happens is when you ask these questions relentlessly, you do get to this calmer state of mind, and it's sort of like it brings all the other things, lessens essentially your attention to other things, and it increases your attention on this one thing. It like calms the mind down, and then that insight may strike. Basically, it will strike. That destroys even the need for effort. Basically, we don't want to be in a state where we have to keep practicing. We want to be lazy. We want to be effortless. And so that is what we're trying to reveal, the effortless fact that is now already the case. Not a state with a beginning and an end.
So, like at first it seems intimidating to bring that into every moment of your life because you're like, how am I going to juggle both of those things, bringing this into every moment of my life and like doing the things in my life. But the point is that I'm not the one doing those things.
That's right. Exactly.
They're just going to happen.
Yes, whatever they are.
Whatever those things are.
But you have to be okay with whatever that is.
Right.
Yes.
And just like at peace that's going to keep going.
And
it's just your.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And the thing is, even if you're not at peace, seemingly, right? So even if something happens and you're like really angry or frustrated or irritated by it, you can observe that too.
Right.
That too is also in my experience, right? And so to whom is that occurring, right? So it's not like, people talk about acceptance, right? And so that can be a very tricky word because you can accept your lack of acceptance too. That's totally fine. I mean, our point is not to say we have to control the emotions in the mind. That is unnecessary. What we want to do is we want to simply notice that they're all reflections in the mirror of awareness. And when you notice, when you hold your attention on the awareness within which they occur, with the question in the back of your mind of, well, whose awareness is this really, right? That will lead you to the place. It will lead you first to a progressive quieting of mind, and then it will lead you to an insight. That will destroy the need for effort, basically, in a nutshell.
So really that's not intimidating at all because there's just infinite room for it to happen because you're not doing anything.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly correct.
Weird.
It's weird. It is weird. It's very counterintuitive. Yeah. Other questions?
I sometimes struggle with being a full-time employed New Yorker and doing this type of work too.
Same.
And I prefer to do this,
Same.
but I also have to pay my rent and run a business, you know, all these different things. So I'm like, well, that kind of sucks because I don't know. I mean, how, you know?
Well, no, I mean, it's a great point. So it's like I told Olivia, it
But-
feels like it's a conflict.
But it's not. It actually lifts you up into that.
That's right. Actually, and it goes with what you said, Bridget, earlier too, about how you were in that conversation with your friend, right? How you almost stood outside the situation, and then it's like you did it better than you could have otherwise. I mean, I don't know. I know you guys know the idea of like flow states, right? It's like people, athletes and performers talk about being in the zone.
Right.
It's exactly that, right? So like, at certain points, this thing strikes you where, you know, if you've practiced whatever your instrument or whatever it is for enough, right? And you get in front of people, and then it's like the right things strike, and suddenly it's like you're not putting any effort in. It's like it's just happening by itself. So that is actually your constant state. Our point is to reveal that that is already the fact, that flow state.
So the like being a fully employed New Yorker, like running your business, making rent, all those things are gonna keep happening and going.
Well, I'll say that, so this is tricky because yes, if that's the way your mind is constructed, right? So it might be the case that, I'm not gonna say that when you turn deeply to the spiritual, it might be that your desires change.
That's exactly what it is.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, I've disconnected with so many friends, and even family members. I mean, I'm so different. I've changed over the last few years because of tapping into all of this, which I'm thrilled about, but I find less and less in common with the people that were in my life pre.
Right, how do you like surround yourself
And
with
how do
people
you
who don't
surround
get it?
yourself? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess it's tricky, and community I think is so important, and that's one thing that I'm lacking here in New York. But it does really shift everything for the better. But it's kind of like a weird, I don't know. And I work with people a lot every day, and it's like New Yorkers are just so intense.
Yeah.
Too, and
Yeah.
so it's like them, and it's a constant kind of like, what is happening? Yeah.
I struggle with that too, like being around people that I'm like, you either haven't found it or you're not even trying to find it.
Yeah.
And like
Right.
that's only slowing me down.
Yeah.
Like it's only getting in my way.
Yeah, it's frustrating
Yeah.
a little bit sometimes.
I mean, this is why traditionally people were told, go to a monastery, go to an ashram.
Yeah.
But the reality is you don't need to. You know, like the fact of the matter is if you go to a monastery and ashram, you know,
They're the same problems.
it's the same problems. There's politics.
I've seen it.
Exactly, that's right. And you bring your own mental problems with you
Yes.
wherever you go too.
That's interesting.
So it's like it's kind of an illusion that that's a solution. But the reality is you are being tossed into the deep end of the ocean effectively. I mean, even mixing metaphors, but you know, every time essentially you're in situations where you feel like you're dealing with intense people and your emotional reactivity is engaged, it's an opportunity to simply notice that emotion itself, like it occurs to somebody, it occurs to me, right? So again,
So my question is,
Uh-huh.
so since my spiritual journey, now I'm like quitting my career, going away, like going down a whole different path.
mm-hmm.
If I was always that same
uh-huh.
how come it's so different now?
Because the content of your mind is different, but is what you truly are, is
The
that
same
different?
Then and now.
In fact, what you truly are, it can't even be described in terms of sameness and difference.
Mhm.
Because there's something which is beyond, see, like all of that is within thought, right? You're caught within like this net
Right.
of thought, right? Like it's things in terms of language, right? And like all the words, like is it the same or is it different?
And those both
So
have
like
an end.
They both have an end,
Yeah.
they both have limitation, right? So this very question of, yeah, but what is the relationship between my true self and how I was then versus how I am now? That whole question is itself coming from the wrong assumption.
Right.
And you can't, there is no right
I always
assumption.
find Vedanta so circular.
Yeah,
It always
because
comes back to the same.
it's trying to loop you out of thinking. That's what it is. See, like you can't get here from there, right? And when you think about it, you're going to be stuck in thought. Like, you can never think your way out of the solution, which is why this self-inquiry is recommended, because any thought you say, you try to come back to the fact of your own awareness of it, essentially.
That was how I felt last time we did close our eyes. I was like, I'm in a loop.
Yeah.
Right. But then I find it helpful to think about, like, you're like, oh, this is who I was and this is who I am now.
Yeah.
Like, anything that has a beginning or end is not the right thing.
Right.
You're off the track.
Right.
And anything you say, like who I was and who I am, again, notice what? That it's a thought.
Right.
It's a thought in your awareness. It's as simple as that. It's a thought in my awareness, and who's the I, whose awareness that is. Again, like, it doesn't have to, even that is too many words. You don't even need words, right? There's just the fact that it's occurring to you, right? So that fact, again, it's like you're looking at the movie screen and I'm telling you, forget what's happening on the screen. Notice that it's being projected on a screen. Can you just pay attention to the projector? Whatever comes on that screen, whether it's a horror movie or a comedy or anything in between, just focus your attention relentlessly on the screen. Can you do that? That's what we're trying to do. Should we try this again? I think we have time for it. Yeah, let's try 5 more minutes, yeah?
Okay.
So I just kept asking myself, who am I? Which
Mhm.
was a continual loop. Question marks arose. And just the thought of, I don't know.
That's good. No, I mean, that's
Nothing.
great.
Like, blank, black, nothing. I don't know. Nothing.
So to whom does the blank occur?
I know.
Exactly.
But then we
Yeah.
went to, I don't
Yeah,
know.
but going to that blank is perfect. I mean, look, this is what you all got in there. I mean, this is what you have to come back to, right? Again and again. You're right. It's a riddle. So it's like a riddle to which there is no verbal answer. So you have to come revisit that blank, whether it's blank feelings or sort of the quieter mind, or however you want to describe it. But effectively, it's the same thing. No matter how you're coming to this sort of threshold that way when you ask this question, and something will come out and grasp you eventually if you do this relentlessly. You can't get there. You can't get all the way by your own effort. You can just sort of come to that threshold. Does that make sense? So what you want to do is exactly that. It's fine that you don't know. Of course, how could you know? It's impossible. Literally impossible. Because the one who knows,
then you.
yeah, how can you know the one who knows?
identify
You
it.
can't. Anything by definition that you know is
Right.
not it. Exactly. So you're totally right. You don't know. So you just go back to that place of not knowing, a mental silence, and you sit there, and any interference that comes up, of any thought, any feeling, anything at all, you just redirect it relentlessly to that, back, over and over and over again, hundreds, thousands of times, right? And you stay there with the desire, like, I want to know what this is, and it will come to you. It is a riddle. It's a riddle. But the effort, that's the effort you expend. And it would be exactly the same thing if you wanted to surrender. You could do exactly the same. You could just simply say, I'm not gonna put in any effort mentally at all. At all. Yeah. So either way, when you surrender like that, you're gonna come to the exact same place, that same quiet. But then what might happen is in both these cases, right, if you surrender, you might quote unquote find yourself being dragged out of surrender. Be like, oh shoot, why can't I keep surrendering? And then you'll have to ask yourself, who's surrendering? Who's surrendering? Who's being dragged out of surrender? Am I the one who surrenders and am being dragged out of surrender? Or am I the one that's somehow there in both situations? Right? And again, it's not a question you can answer in words. If you find yourself putting words to it, that's by definition wrong, the wrong answer. So you have to then go back from that to the one who's aware of that. And it's only when, I think you all came to the threshold of it one way or the other, and that's all you can do. You have to come to that threshold again and again. That is the entire practice. Make sense? How was your experience?
It was not, I felt like I wasn't as close as the last one. Like you said, felt like I was getting dragged out a little bit. I felt like I was getting dragged out by my own ego, being logically, I feel like I understand this, but not being able to get there in my mind is frustrating me.
Yes.
But then I was like, okay, well, what is the thing that's feeling like they
Exactly.
like their ego's getting in the way,
Exactly.
and then I started thinking about
That's right.
how I would incorporate this in my daily life, at work, and I was like, I can already foresee all the mundane human things that I feel like I have to keep up with, pulling me from it, and I just had to I was feeling the drag.
Yeah.
I was feeling the drag in the moment, and also my future drag that will happen, and I kept having to be okay, no, this is the come back down. But yeah.
No, totally. I mean, that makes complete sense. All that makes complete sense. And it's almost like jujitsu or something, right? Every thought that seems like it's gonna come at you, you can just use it against itself effectively, right? Because again, whom does that thought occur, and whom does that thought occur? And also, you said something important, which was this feeling of wanting to get there, which you had in your first, first attempt as well, right? That getting there, that thought prevents you from getting there.
And I almost wanted to be I want to ask him how long it took him to get there, and I was like, no, that's not, it doesn't matter, that's not the point, how long it takes to get there.
You're already, the thing is, that's the thing, right? If you drop thought, you are there. that is it, right? The reason we construct this whole scenario of seeking is precisely because we can't drop thought, right? So like we're stubbornly bound to thought. And who is stubbornly bound to thought? That's the real. That's why I say in the end, all of the seeking you'll see like it's all fictional, right? Like there's a sense in which all of this is just part of the story. There's a story of a person who didn't know, like this is your own story, right? Like, and then who learned a lesson and then did know, right? That's a story, but we're not the story. So the truth of the matter is when you understand what I'm talking about, it will be clear that there is nothing to understand in some sense, and no one to understand it, and no one who didn't understand it at one point, right? This whole quest is nothing. There's some truth in that. There's some deep truth in that. Because otherwise it would have a beginning and an end. What we're looking for is what's permanent, right? That can't be touched by life's obstacles. So if it were something that really you could have lost and then regained, or something that you don't know and then you're finding out, or you're a seeker and then you're a master, any of these things are all things with beginnings and ends. We don't want them. We only want that which is already perfect, which was always perfect, and which will always be perfect, no matter what happens. So that's the paradox, that's the riddle, and that's why we have to go outside words for it. But yeah, I mean, it sounds exactly right. It sounds 100% exactly right. How about you?
Mine was pretty cool, actually. Like, as I closed my eyes, I heard a voice saying, like, all right, let's go, like, to, like, start meditating.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, wait a second. I was like, all right, so who is that? And it was really trippy, actually. I was like, who is that? And I felt it, like, more in my chest.
Uh-huh.
And it felt good. Like, God, I don't know how to explain it. And then I kind of was picturing myself, but, like, my physical body in my mind for just a moment. And it was really obvious to me that, like, it's not my physical body at all.
Mm-hmm.
That is me, or, like, what I just heard.
Yes.
And then I remember saying to what I thought was the one that said, let's go, I was like, okay, so let's go. I spoke to that, not person, but whoever, and it was immediately everything went quiet, and I just started meditating, I guess, like just complete quiet. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm so used to my mind not obeying me that it was obvious to me that whatever I just talked to or heard was not my mind. And I remember I read this book a while ago, and it said that your subconscious is an obedient servant to you, and all you have to do is just tell it anything. Like it was a book about affirmations. So it was like, say you're happy, whatever. And it kind of reminded me of that, because is that my subconscious that I just touched a little bit? Because I immediately was like, who is that? And then I said, okay, like it was taking orders from me, whatever it was, and I felt it here. And then a few minutes later, a thought came of like something about, I don't even remember what it was, but daily life or something, and it threw me out of it, and I was like, well, who was that? And it was obvious to me that it was not what this was, and I felt it more here. I don't know.
Sure, no, that makes sense, right? So it's more cerebral, and this was something more emotional or
Yeah.
something. Maybe like it felt like it was a symbolization
like
of connecting.
Me,
Well, so two things.
whatever it was.
So two things I'll say. One is, I mean, it's good that you can connect with that state of quiet like that, and
It was only for like
that's great.
But yeah,
Still, it's something.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. Even for 1 second, it's a good
Yeah.
thing. And so, if you can, another way of looking at this is, if you can take that state of quiet out into the world with you. It's the same thing,
That's what I
right?
was
Call it
thinking.
surrender, call it self-inquiry, or call it being able to maintain a peaceful, quiet, clear mind in constantly in all situations, right? So it's another way of putting the exact same thing. The other thing I would say is, something to think about is the voice from your head and the voice from your heart, so to say, to whom do they occur? So in some sense, what I'm trying to get you to see is they're both occurring to you. The true you is beyond both voices. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we can talk, nothing wrong with talking in terms of the unconscious or the voice of like a spiritual voice which connects you with the quiet. That's great. And there's concepts like that can be helpful. But But from a self-inquiry standpoint, what I want you to notice is somebody was aware of both voices, right? You were aware of the voice that directed you towards that quiet, you were aware of the quiet, and then you were aware of the voice that drew you out of the quiet. So the I was there the entire time. So who is that who was there the entire time?
That's intense.
That's what we're going for. Because that's what's permanent.
Yeah.
Because at first I was like, oh, that's good. You like separated your thoughts
Yeah.
from the I, but then there's an I perceiving
There's
both
even
of them.
another.
Exactly. If you can distinguish it, if you can put a word to it, it means it's something in your perception. So the I, even though we have that word I, we're trying to disrupt it. We're trying to say, well, what is it actually?
Yeah.
Right? So again, I'm not trying to say don't access that state of quiet. If you have a spiritual voice and get you to that quiet, that's great. But I mean, the truth of the matter is this is the value of, you know, worship and things like that. I mean, it can put you in touch with those states of quiet, and that's great. But I also want you in the back of your mind to also realize whatever voice it is, however spiritual a voice it may be, and to whatever state of quiet it puts you in even that state of quiet, they're all things that occur to the I. And being drawn out of them are all things that occur to the I. And so the true self is what endures all the changes, whatever they may be. But you don't have to think, you don't have to even figure out, there's nothing to figure out there. It's basically just a matter of whatever happens, whatever voice is speaking, turn from that to the one who's aware of it. That's it. And if you get to a place of quiet, you can stay there as long as it's a quiet that, I mean, frankly, you can stay there, period. But ideally, you don't want to just be accessing that state only in closed-eye meditation. That's the thing, right? So you want to take that state of quietness, where something in you, no matter what is happening, is unruffled, into and maintain it while other things are happening. That is the point of all of this, right? And so, and ultimately, if you can do that, one way or the other, through surrender or self-inquiry or whatever method works for you ultimately, frankly, if you can maintain that quiet in your ordinary life situations, that will lead you to a point where, that will lead you to the insight that we're looking for.
I felt like there were some moments that I was kind of like letting even more go to get to, I guess, the I, but it felt, I don't know because I didn't go there yet, but it felt like when I was kind of opening that up, like I was nothing anymore. I was you guys. I was just like, I don't know.
I mean, but I think that's a touch of it. I mean, that's what you're describing is you're touching on it. You're touching on the truth, basically. It's a glimpse of the truth. It's a touch of the truth.
Yeah.
And there might be, like you said in your earliest, I think your first meditation, right? There might be a little bit of fear connected with that. Like, oh, I'm going to lose my current identity. There's really nothing to fear. There's really nothing to fear, actually. But it's something to notice, because if you have that fear, try to inquire to whom it occurs.
Yeah.
Same thing, as with always. Or if it is something which, like I say, has connections to some childhood trauma that's been undealt with or something like that, you might need to deal with that in some other, use the tools that will work for that as best they can. All right, so questions? Other questions?
I think that I am very rigid, I feel like. I just got out of a relationship where he was completely fluid, and I'm quite rigid. I don't like using that word, but I read it in a book and it was like, it made sense to me. But like I have structure, I have a lot of structure. I grew up with structure. First generation here, my family always said you just have to work, you just have to work. You just have to work, you have to make money, I came from a Middle Eastern background where we had war in our culture, just like war and all this And I actually took a workshop here, a family constellation workshop, and the instructor was telling me how that really plays into like now. And I kind of understood it after he explained it, and like the more I read about it, I was like, like I am very like, this is what it is, and this is right, and this is wrong, and this is black, and this is white. So when I met this guy, it really opened me up to just like, well, no, you know, what are my beliefs versus my mom's and my dad's and all these other things. So it kind of did open me up to just, so I'm working on not being as, I want to let go of a lot of these things because I do want to be more fluid. And I think that, so I do think I have a lot of fear of going there completely. I don't know why, but I do feel like things will fall apart.
Yeah, right. That's
Make
that's
you
right.
comfortable in
Yeah.
what you know
Yeah,
already.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
right.
And
No.
the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, the fear of the unknown too.
Exactly. That's
Well,
exactly
I don't
right.
want to identify it. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
No,
No,
but that's
it's,
true.
It's true. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. It makes
Yeah.
sense. And I'm always someone who, I don't really believe in like steamrolling fears. So, you know, respect it and honor it and go at the pace that it's comfortable with and try to address it in its own, you know,
Yeah.
listen to it and, you know, address it in the way that is going to be natural and organic, essentially.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Also, you saw that fluidity with that other person that you were with, so you saw it was possible.
Yeah.
Like you needed to see that.
I
in
needed
order
to
like,
see
let
that.
go.
Yeah. No, he was
Or
very
start
much
to
a
let
mirror.
go.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was very much a mirror for me, and no, it was definitely a relationship that made me see so much of what I'm not, but what I would like to be, but not all of it. And I don't know if it's all fear, because a lot of it is also like, well, you know, I kind of have worked my ass off to have like a good life, and I don't know if not to say I give it up, but I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like,
no. I
how
think
do
you're touching
manage-
on an interesting point, which
Yeah.
is this question of, you know, it's fun being the video game character sometimes. You know, it's you know, I kept thinking of this metaphor and I kept forgetting to say it, but Ramana Maharshi has this example, right, of imagine a really hot day and there's a shade of a cool tree, right? And so living life ordinarily is we are running out of the shade into the hot sun. That's our narrative, our story, right? So that we can have the pleasure of going back into the shade. That's pleasure and pain, right? When we do self-inquiry and we come to the state of the quiet mind, what we're effectively doing is staying in the shade, which is different, right? Because you don't get the contrast, right? I mean, there is contrast, but there isn't. At some deep level, there's something beneath the contrast. You know, that's the thing. It's not like, right.
But
There's something which
isn't
can't be
like,
said.
Isn't it like not the shade or the sun, it's the
It's kind of not right. That's right.
absence
Yes,
of all.
that's correct. Exactly. It's not quite the shade or the sun. You're absolutely
Both,
right.
but neither.
That's right. Exactly. This is the problem with all metaphors.
Right.
100% correct.
Right.
But there is that fear, like, oh, you know, of losing the pleasures that you had before in some sense, right? And so that takes time to get over. I mean, you have to sort of deal with those objections. But the reality is, you know, and you may have to do more reading or sort of interacting with this situation to convince yourself that this is so. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, the bliss that you are is superior to any bliss that you can get in life, because anything in life is beginning and end, has limitations, is tainted by fear of losing it, all kinds of problems. So anyone would prefer, if they knew it, the inner perfect constant bliss.
Because you're like untouchable.
It's untouchable. It's untouchable. That's right, and it's what you are already. And that's another way of putting it. You know, that's why surrender is recommended, right? If you have enough faith, you simply say, "Well, I am this," and you just relax. If you can just relax, you're there. That's it. It's simple as that. But it's because we can't. Typically, that all the other things are.
Well, New York is, I don't know. I love New York. I'm here for 10 years. I'm gonna stay here, I think, for a while, but I don't know, it's like the setting sometimes too, it's like it's too
I feel like you're like consuming something at every single moment,
Sure.
and it's like all the consumption. Like I don't want anything coming in or going out.
Yeah.
I just want it to be like
Stop.
stop.
Yeah, well, that's what this is for.
Right.
Precisely.
Because
You
New
control your
York is
mind.
just consumption at
It's
every moment,
so
no matter what you want.
much.
It's a bad thing, it's a good thing. It's the train,
yeah,
it's
the
the work.
noise, I know it's an
Consume,
excuse,
consume,
but it's
consume.
so much.
And you're like, I can't hold anymore.
I mean, if you hold to the eye, you can control how that stimulation affects you, basically. that's the.
I feel like I'm not like alone enough to do this practice. Like I feel like I need to be like alone.
But the practice is meant to be something that you do at all times. It's not something which, I mean,
I guess in the
point,
beginning, I feel like.
Oh,
I
in the
need to be,
beginning.
like,
Yeah, I mean,
alone.
sure. No, I mean, a lot of people, that's true. So a lot of people want to set aside time for this at the beginning. They have their 20 minutes or whatever it is in the morning or evening or whatever it is. But very quickly, I mean, it's almost like, being asked to juggle while you're going about your day. Maybe at the very beginning you learn juggling when you're just like sitting alone doing nothing. You should learn to juggle, but then eventually you can start juggling while you're doing other things, and then you can juggle at all times. Eventually, it's just that easy.